Operation Valkyrie, the day Germany almost changed history. The bomb that nearly ended everything. At 12:42 p.m. on July 20th, 1944, a massive explosion ripped through Hitler's Eastern Front headquarters, the Wolf's Lair. Wooden beams splintered like matchsticks. Papers erupted into a whirlwind of flame and smoke. 4 men lay dead or dying. And at the epicenter of this devastation, impossibly, Adolf Hitler staggered to his feet, alive, his eardrums ruptured, his right arm temporarily paralyzed but very much breathing. 200 miles away in Berlin, a one-eyed colonel named Klaus von Stauffenberg believed he had just killed the Führer. He was wrong. And that miscalculation would doom not just him, but over 7,000 Germans who dared to dream of a different future. This is the story of Operation Valkyrie, the closest anyone ever came to killing Hitler from within his own regime, and the dramatic finale of Germany's internal resistance movement. The aristocrat who chose treason. Klaus von Stauffenberg wasn't supposed to be a revolutionary. Born into Bavarian nobility in 1907, he was the archetype of German military excellence, intelligent, charismatic, and utterly committed to his country. Early in the war, he'd even found aspects of National Socialism appealing, particularly its restoration of German military pride after the humiliation of Versailles. But something changed in him as the years progressed. Perhaps it was witnessing SS atrocities in Poland. Perhaps it was the massacre of Jewish populations in Ukraine that he observed firsthand. Or maybe it was the dawning realization that Hitler's strategic incompetence was leading Germany toward total annihilation. Whatever the catalyst, by 1943, Stauffenberg had transformed from loyal officer to determined assassin. His conversion coincided with personal catastrophe. In April 1943, while serving in North Africa, his vehicle was strafed by Allied fighters. He lost his left eye, his right hand, and 2 fingers from his remaining hand. Most men would have retired. Stauffenberg saw it as liberation. He now had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Since the generals have so far done nothing, the colonels must now take action, he told his brother Berthold. It was both a declaration of intent and an indictment of Germany's military leadership, many of whom privately despised Hitler but lacked the courage to act. The conspiracy beneath the swastika. Here's what makes Operation Valkyrie so cinematically perfect and historically tragic. The plotters used Hitler's own contingency plan to try to overthrow him. The real Operation Valkyrie was actually a legitimate emergency protocol designed by the German High Command to maintain order if a crisis, like a slave labor uprising or an SS coup, threatened the Nazi regime from within. Stauffenberg and his co-conspirators, including General Friedrich Olbricht and General Ludwig Beck, ingeniously planned to trigger this protocol by falsely claiming that Hitler had been assassinated by rogue SS elements. Once activated, the reserve army would mobilize to restore order, but instead of protecting the Nazi regime, they would arrest SS leadership, seize control of government buildings, and install a new provisional government. It was audacious, elaborate, and depended on perfect timing. The conspiracy extended far deeper than most people realize. This wasn't a handful of disgruntled officers. It was a network that included politicians, diplomats, churchmen, and military leaders across multiple countries. Former Leipzig Mayor Karl Goerdeler was tapped to become the new chancellor. General Beck would serve as head of state. Even Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox himself, was allegedly aware of the plot, though his exact level of involvement remains historically contested. These weren't idealistic rebels or communist insurgents. They were the cream of German society, aristocrats, intellectuals, and career officers who had concluded that Hitler was leading their country to ruin. They envisioned a post-Hitler Germany that would immediately seek peace with the Western Allies while continuing to fight the Soviet Union. A fever dream that Churchill and Roosevelt would never have entertained, but one the conspirators clung to with desperate hope. 6 previous attempts. The failures. In March 1943, officers planted a bomb disguised as cognac bottles on Hitler's plane. The bomb failed to detonate due to a faulty detonator affected by the cold cargo hold temperature. In November 1943, another officer planned to blow himself up alongside Hitler during an exhibition of captured Soviet weapons. Hitler left early. Stauffenberg himself had tried twice before July 20th. On July 11th and again on July 15th, he'd carried a bomb to meetings with Hitler, but the conditions weren't right. Himmler or Göring weren't present, and the conspirators wanted to eliminate multiple Nazi leaders simultaneously. Each failure ratcheted up the tension. The Gestapo was closing in. They'd already arrested members of the Kreisau Circle, a related resistance group. Time was running out. Germany was being crushed between the Soviets advancing from the east and the Allies pushing from Normandy in the west. If the conspirators didn't act immediately, there would be nothing left of Germany to save. The day that almost was, July 20th, 1944, began with Stauffenberg flying from Berlin to Rastenburg in East Prussia, carrying 2 bombs in his briefcase. His plan was to arm both explosives and place them near Hitler during the daily military briefing at the Wolf's Lair. Everything immediately began going wrong. The briefing was moved from Hitler's underground bunker to a wooden conference building due to the summer heat, meaning the blast would dissipate rather than being contained. Stauffenberg, with only 3 fingers and 1 eye, struggled to arm even 1 bomb before being interrupted, leaving the second unprimed. When he placed the briefcase under the conference table mere feet from Hitler, another officer, Colonel Heinz Brandt, found it in his way and casually moved it to the far side of a thick wooden table support. These 3 accidents, the venue change, the single bomb, and the repositioned briefcase, are why Hitler survived. When the bomb exploded, Stauffenberg was already heading to his plane. He saw the explosion, saw the chaos, and reasonably concluded that no one could have survived. He flew back to Berlin to activate Valkyrie, convinced he'd just changed history. 4 hours of alternative history. For approximately 4 hours on the afternoon of July 20th, Germany existed in a superposition of realities. In one timeline, Hitler was dead, and the conspirators were taking control. In another, Hitler was alive, and the conspiracy was collapsing. The tragedy of Operation Valkyrie is that during those 4 hours, the conspirators could have succeeded despite Hitler's survival, if they'd acted decisively. In Berlin, the reserve army began mobilizing. Orders went out across the Reich to arrest Nazi leadership. In Paris, SS and Gestapo officers were actually detained by the German military. The conspirators occupied the war ministry. For a brief, shining moment, it almost worked. But then came the fatal hesitations, officers waiting for confirmation that Hitler was dead. Commanders unsure whether to follow obviously treasonous orders. The propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, holed up in his ministry, managed to get a phone connection to Hitler at the Wolf's Lair. When wavering officers heard the Führer's voice very much alive, the spell broke. By 8 p.m., Hitler broadcast a radio address to the nation. By midnight, the conspiracy had completely unraveled. The aftermath: blood and honor. The Nazi revenge was biblical in its scope. Stauffenberg was executed by firing squad in the War Ministry courtyard that very night. His last words reportedly, "Long live sacred Germany." His co-conspirators were shot alongside him by the light of car headlights. But Hitler wanted more than quick executions. He wanted humiliation, terror, and spectacle. Over 7,000 arrests followed. The major conspirators were tried before the People's Court, where Judge Roland Freisler screamed abuse at them during show trials designed to degrade and demoralize. Many were hanged with piano wire from meat hooks, their deaths filmed for Hitler's viewing pleasure. The conspirators faced their deaths with remarkable courage. Many gave stirring final statements. General Henning von Treschow, who had been part of the earlier attempts, killed himself rather than face torture, but left behind words that echo through history. The worth of a man is certain only if he is prepared to sacrifice his life for his convictions. Even their families weren't spared. Under Sippenhaft, blood guilt, relatives of conspirators were arrested and imprisoned, including children. Stauffenberg's pregnant wife Nina was sent to a concentration camp. The questions that haunt history: Operation Valkyrie, raises profound questions that historians still debate. Would a successful assassination have ended the war earlier, saving millions of lives? Or would it have created a stab-in-the-back myth even more potent than the one that helped birth Nazism after World War I? The conspirators themselves were morally complex. Many had served the Nazi regime for years, implementing its policies, fighting its wars. Some held anti-Semitic views themselves even as they opposed Hitler's genocidal extremes. Were they heroes, or merely people who realized too late that they'd backed a monster? What's certain is that Operation Valkyrie represented the conscience of Germany, proof that not all Germans were complicit, that some were willing to die to stop the madness. In a regime built on total obedience, they chose treason. In a military culture that prized loyalty above all, they chose assassination.